Photography is massive, it's fascinating, it's beautiful, it's as much or as little as you'd like to make it.
I feel like I'm going to unravel somehow. It's just like photography has always been like an anchor. It's always been there for me. I've always enjoyed it. I've always found comfort in it.
Don't get too close. I've got a cold. This has been a gift that has made its way through the family. If we could walk separately today, maybe you a couple of, oh my word, look at this, the trees. This one's come down almost across the path. Seems to have been a theme of the last few weeks. Yes, if you could walk perhaps, let me get a picture of it. Let me get a sketchbook picture of something and nothing. Look at this. That really is the wind at its full veracity. F4 and 400 ISO, 1/2/5. It doesn't really show the... okay, if I shoot a portrait of this one, we'll get the idea of... Yeah, there's a bit more scale involved in this one. A sketchbook image to start the walk. Yeah, keep several steps ahead of me. Upwind today, that'd be good. Everybody's had it, except our, in our family that is, except our Jack and Barney. Come on, Boos, this way. He's Barkalot's out with us again today, the barking machine. First time in a couple of weeks. He does seem full of beans, full of turkey actually, already as it happens. And I'll be honest with you, at least one practice pig in a blanket. Neil, I know. He's not living on a diet of them, don't worry. Just be thankful he doesn't like sprouts. Otherwise, you'd be needing to walk more than several steps upwind. Anyway, this is the penultimate edition prior to our Christmas break. Then, well, we're back with hopefully a bit of a Christmas gift in terms of somebody I've been wanting to talk to for a long time now as a guest. Come on, pups, this way, not that way. So today, let me explain the title. Photography is my anchor. It's something that's said by one of my guests today, and we have 3 in this edition. Now, 2 could certainly be considered more weighty in their subject matter. And sandwiched between the 2, I have a short chat with a former guest who'll feature in 2025. Jack Lowe, who's just had his life's work of the last decade anyway, about the lifeboats that he's photographed, the lifeboat stations and the people that work within them. He's just had it exhibited at, a very important museum in the UK. So that chat is to come, but as part of our conversation, I spied a little special something with my ears and my eyes that he's doing called A Photo for You, which is such a lovely, charming, beautifully giving idea that I couldn't wait to share with you. So we're going to do that today. And my other 2 guests, well, one is a friend of the show, Andrew Gifford, who, through his Instagram grid, describes in pictures the most potent, personal, at the moment anyway, photo project, which describes how it feels to have ME. And then I'm also featuring the work of Dana Stirling, whose book, Why Am I Sad?, is testament to just how important creativity is in times of adversity. Dana's book is a visual diary that explores the relationship between mental health and artistic expression. So yes, it's one of our deeper editions, but with an overarching message that's very much the sum of its title today as the show goes. And even though the title is a bit of a spoiler for one of the whys in today's show, it did make me think a lot about how photography is very much my anchor too. And I came up with 3 important words about photography and this thing about it being an anchor. The first of which is memories. Perhaps the most obvious of the 3. It's the gift that doesn't stop giving in the way that each year we make a book of family memories. And like the metaphorical bottle of vintage wine that I reference, this is a project that just gets better and better with age, as those memories bring broader and broader smiles with each year. The next word is perspective, which is a really important part of my own photography, perhaps yours too. I suppose for me it's a guide particularly photo trips like the one I made earlier this year with some very special friends when we visited West Africa, learning how we're very different, but really not very different. And again, looking back through the years of my own photography enables me to see that this really is a journey of discovery and hopefully improvement. And then the third word was grounding. Pictures or photographs, I love that they evoke feelings of nostalgia and connection. The way that our art, our photography can really ground us emotionally when we feel adrift. And in many ways, that's what today's show is all about, really. That commonality that many of us share in this community, that feeling of grounding that photography beautifully brings.
Today on the Photo Walk.
Thank God for the internet, because the community is amazing. The resources available online are just phenomenal. And one of the things that this condition has shown me is good still exists on the internet.
And it highlights that you can come up with wonderful ideas that are just that, just wonderful ideas, just really simple ideas that are quite counterculture as well. And yes, I mean, I can imagine people say, yeah, but where's the money? Do you know what? There isn't any.
No.
This is not about money. It's not about that at all.
Photography for me was such an amazing escape because I started photographing inside this house of feeling that I couldn't communicate with people. I couldn't talk, I couldn't write, I couldn't do anything that expressed it. So photography was suddenly this amazing outlet.
Andrew Gifford, Jack Lowe and Dana Stirling, my guests today. Welcome along as we make our photo walks together. A show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week. Enjoying the letters and inspirational stories you've sent in and listening back to special studio guests from around the world. I'll take a peek into that mailbag in a moment for a flavour of today's letters into the show, but before that, I'd like you to know how thankful I am for those who've kept me walking with a microphone for 4 years. Thank you to all those who believe in this podcast enough that you're now Patreon members. And also to mpb.com, who sponsor this show, Roll Tape. A service I use for buying, selling and trading used camera gear is MPB. As a website platform, mpb.com is the place where I can safely buy, sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online. And online guarantees make this a place I feel safe to buy from, unlike some other marketplaces. Here's how it works. You go online to mpb.com and search for gear that you'd like to add to your kit bag. Or if you're selling gear you no longer need, click the button at the top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading and just follow the very easy instructions. From there, you print off a packing label, stick it on the box with all your gear in it. It's collected by a courier free of charge from your front door. And the best bit, MPB pays you for your camera gear within days. So join me and the hundreds of thousands of photographers every year in the US, Europe and the UK who know that MPB is the place to buy, sell, trade and create. Just a PS to that, MPB did, I think, a fascinating poll which revealed a few surprising statistics. And everybody likes a stat these days, don't they? Cost-cutting and sustainability concerns lead more people now to choose used gifts at this time of year. 42% of UK adults are planning to give at least one used gift this Christmas. Millennials, they're driving the whole thing. 59% of them are planning to gift used this year, and 63% of UK adults will be happy to receive a used gift if it was in good condition, compared to 45% in 2020. 45 to 63. I think that's huge, and I find that fascinating. And I know that figures will change across the globe, but I would hazard a bet that they're all going that direction. I know that whilst a lot of this is driven by the price of living, I think that this ethical rebooting in terms of attitude when it comes to sustainability is a heartening sign for the planet. It's said that if we want to make small changes, we'll make a difference. And these figures to me seem like pretty big changes in terms of our thought processes. Right. On the show today, Melissa Berman finds that her late uncle was somewhat of a photographic legend as his pictures of New York in 3 decades from the 60s go on display at one of the world's most prestigious photo events. Craig Wilson is celebrating originality. Rikki-Paul Bunder has set himself a weekend photographic challenge and is making the most extraordinary pictures of peace, of quiet, of tranquility in all weathers. And I'll also remind you of the one-word assignment for the month: photographic inspiration to take your creativity to number 11. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. SD cards or a spare roll of film, check. And a selfie printer, some gaffer tape and an envelope for something I'll reveal later. Can't check that off the list yet, Neil. It's a tad unexpected, but perhaps next week. Let's walk. Do you want one of these? Come on. I'm sure the audience has missed hearing you eat, Sir Barkalot. Right. Oh, hang on. Let's not drop them. Let's not waste them. No, don't eat them straight out the treat tin. He's got some new ones, actually. They're slightly... There was a reason for it. They're better for him. They settle in the stomach better. This form of... well, it's not exactly kibble, but they are a bit smaller. And I said to the man in the pet store, I tried to explain to him that I want them to be crunchy because he gets heard on the microphone. What? What do you mean he needs them to be crunchy? Yeah, for the microphone. He does. You are such an important part of this show with what you write in. It gives our community a real uniqueness. Your thoughts about walking, the creativity, your photography provides a very welcome respite for the noise of this world, as together during this show we put some miles under our feet and make a picture or three to remind us of where those footprints, muddy ones today, were left. Before I dive into the mailbag, here's a mini missive from our friend Craig Wilson. Good day to you, Neil, and your other listener. I had a card the other day, Craig. Not for me, not for Barney, no, not for you, Barkalot, but for the other listener. And the thing is, I can't even name check them because it was from the other listener. I is confused, as they grammatically say incorrectly. I've just been on a little road trip to Glencoe, says Craig, for a couple of walks, taking in the fresh air and making photos. And while stood at the waterfall at the bottom of Bochella Etive Moor, one of the most recognisable mountains in Scotland, I think, Craig, so you're lucky to be there, I got talking to a guy who said he was just trying to shoot the honeypot locations, nothing else. We talked about trying to make an original picture, something unique, and I wondered if every picture is in fact unique because we make it. Yes, it is. Perhaps that's how imposter syndrome starts, because we're comparing our work too much to others, says Craig, and how their eye sees stuff. Anyway, I walked away happy with my photo, knowing I took the best photo I could on the day, and I got to see the waterfalls and the mountains for myself. And it's a beautiful part of the world. I'll be sure to put some links in so we can understand where you were walking and photographing. Huge fan of the show, Craig Wilson. Well, thank you, Craig. That's very kind of you. P.S. A couple of photos from my trip, which I will pop onto the show page, Craig. And I am just a little envious of the fact you can just take a little road trip down the road amongst such majesty in terms of the view. Oh, I'd love that very much. I fear I'm on a photo walk today. I thought I'd come for a bit of peace and quiet, and already the industrial sounds, you can hear them in the background, and there's somebody doing some wood cutting not far away from here. So we might be walking a long way, pups, to go and find some peace and quiet. But you are right, every picture you take or make is a reflection of your unique perspective. We've said that, haven't we, many times? Nobody else sees the world like you do. That's the fantastic thing about this. Stand 10 photographers next to each other. The pictures will be, if only slightly sometimes, but they will be different. Your originality lies in being you, Craig. So it does, unless of course somebody's leaving marks on the floor as to where to position your tripods. And and settings, what settings to use, but I don't think that app exists just yet, does it? If it does, nurse the screens I want to hide. But yeah, originality. There's only one person pressing that shutter, and that's you, Craig. That's you. A couple of weeks ago, my guest was Joe Madsen, who talked about his book Bloodwork, which is it's now a printed piece of work, a book from a decade and a bit of street photography, a project that he made. And it was after his doctor said, Joe, we need to get that cholesterol reading down, fella. So Joe stepped out from his door each morning to go to work with a camera and took a little bit longer, making some walks. Gone were the New York subway rides to his office front door, and dare I say, visits to Subway. He got off blocks away and creatively wandered with his camera and curiosity. Sounds fabulous. Now, Joe introduced a friend of his, Melissa Berman, to our community following his chat with us on the show, and I got this letter, which proves the power of just saying to a friend of yours, have you ever heard of this thing I listen to called The Photo Walk, can actually work? Because I have this letter from Melissa. I listened to your wonderful podcast today. My friend Joe Madsen was interviewed. So proud of him and his book. And I wanted to reach out and tell you a bit about another man known to walk for miles and miles in New York City, every day, camera in hand. Only he did it in the 60s to the 80s. My uncle, Ernest Stone, was quintessential born and bred New Yorker, living an artful life during a transitional period of the city's history. He was a DJ for WMCA, an actor, and later on the voice of Channel 13. He was a self-taught artist and devoted his life to photography, and later collage work, from the late 60s until he passed in 1992. He had a one-man show at the Arena Gallery in 1975, including a series called New York A to Z. He shied away, though, from the business side of fine art, and so after that show, he just, continued chasing his vision and just making art for art's sake. As a child and young adult, I'd spend entire days just walking with him. We'd go to the Met, where he'd teach me about art, like learning the rules before breaking them, finding your voice and being open to inspiration. After, he'd reward my patience with a hot pretzel. They were so good back then. Have they lost their goodness then? We'd meander through Central Park, back to Fifth Avenue, and sometimes we'd go all the way to Soho to the galleries. I'd question why he wasn't showing and selling what he created. But he'd say to me, that's not really why I do it. In 1992, his health declined, and it didn't look like he'd ever walk again, sadly. He couldn't imagine life without walking with his camera. And 2 weeks before he passed that same year, he looked up at me from his hospital bed and said, I'm ready. You can imagine where my mind went, but when I asked him what he meant, he said, I'm ready to put my work out into the world. So he left me his entire archive, and when my aunt passed in 2018, I took possession and began working to realise his passing wish. I had no idea where to start or what to do, but I made it my goal, and step by step, so many people have shown up to guide and help me. It's been an enlightening, often overwhelming, but mostly really enjoyable journey. A few weeks ago, his work was on exhibit at the Grand Palais in Paris for Paris Photo. What? Paris Photo? Don't rub it in, Melissa. I was there watching them put the signs up, and I flew home just a couple of days before the whole thing opened. Talk about timing, or lack of it. Yeah, when I saw I'd forgotten, I know I shouldn't have done, I should have diarised this and perhaps planned things much, much better, but when I saw the signs for Paris Photo, I thought, I'm sure the family won't mind if I just disappear for an hour or 10. But no, it was a couple of days before it opened. So I might have seen your uncle's work. Oh, see. 3 walls of the London-based gallery that is now representing him were covered with my uncle's photos. The reaction was incredible to witness as people discovered him and his work. I listened as people expressed interest to the gallerists. I watched people taking photos of his work, pointing at it and taking it in like he used to when he saw something that spoke to him. I received messages on Instagram and email from an arts journalist wanting to put him on the Don't Miss at Paris photo write-up. Just a wonderful affirmation for a man who dedicated so much of his life to photography. Many people asked if there was a book, and so that's on my agenda next, as well as continuing to work with his gallerists, curators, and others interested in helping me share his story and his archive. You can peek at some images and read more about him at erneststone.com. I'll be sure, of course, to put that onto the show page. Thanks kindly for your time and for your wonderful newsletter and podcast. I'm so happy that Joe introduced me to it. And thank you, Melissa, for your letter and the introduction to your uncle's work. Melissa, I'm going to have to concentrate for a second. We've just entered the world of I'm not quite sure if I can get through this part of the path. Hang on. Well, that's handy. Somebody's put out a piece of wood to go across this bit, but it only reaches halfway. Right. All right, we're there, wet foot and all. So yeah, thank you, Melissa, for your letter and the introduction to your uncle's work. And of course, I took a long, lingering look at Ernest's work, which I will link to on the show page today. What I like very much, very, very much, is, and this plays to me, that he was obviously taken by detail. The sort of details that you might pass by and discard, like political posters that had gone past their sell-by date, the projects as well, the bags. Oh, what a great idea! A wonderful study of the ordinary. I think it would be nice actually to chat to you sometime as the curator of his work. It's just magnificent. It feels to me, it really does, like it's a kind of it's one of those Vivian Maier finds. I truly, truly mean that. So yeah, we should chat. In the meantime, much to look at here, and a reminder that photography, as you'll hear it referenced to in the Extra Mile today, is actually not just the greatest observation tool you can record with in a split second, but in reality, probably the only time machine we're ever likely really to have. I will leave a link to Ernest Stone's work on the show page today. Oh look, this is a gate to nowhere. We're at the gate to nowhere. Look, still makes a lovely sounds. But I used to walk through this gate, the Pinstriped Express just passing by in the background as well. Good morning, all in your pinstripes. But yeah, I used to walk past this gate, and or walk through it rather. It was one of the lovely sounds of this walk along this part of the Kennet. But a tree's just come down and gone straight through the fence next to it, and the gate no longer serves a purpose because they've just cleared a space to walk through instead. I like those sounds of our walks, pups. I do. So I do. What way are we going to go? Left or right? Should we go this way? Let's walk toward the lock. This way, pups. Thank you for joining me on my walks this year. I really appreciate it. I thoroughly enjoy. I love making this show, as I tell you quite often. I know I was trying to explain our little show the other day to a future guest, or the agent of a future guest. At any rate, sounds fancy, Neil. I know, yes. And I do think people really stand by the way. I'm going to use a word that's going to age me. This word is like a time machine in itself, but this one takes you back to the 70s. Imagine me with hair and bell-bottom corduroy jeans. Neil, I'm having my breakfast? No, thank you. But I really do think that people dig the idea of a photography show, led or guided, if you will, by letters from the community. Neil, did you just use the word dig? Yes, I did. I know. It could be a dollar in the pot word, couldn't it? Although dollar in the pot is usually reserved for the overuse of words like or you know, or cliches like at the end of the day it gets dark. But I really think people love that idea that this show is led by its community. So I am very thankful for your friendship through the show. We've had some wonderful guests, haven't we, who share a whole plethora of emotions, stories, and the pictures that they tell. My word, that water, you could probably hear it. It's really pushing through the lock, even though both doors are closed. That's powerful waters running down this river right now. Yes, a whole plethora of emotions. So next week as we walk, I thought for our pre-Christmas drinks, which for me on the path is a coffee out the show flask with a Garibaldi or four, we could indulge ourselves in some of the really good whys and the inspiration we've had across the past year of the photo walk. So yeah, we'll play through some of the best whys of the past year, plus some choice inspirational moments. And I need a very inspirational title. So because you're much better at this sort of stuff than me, old Neil, you flatter me, I'm looking to you to give me the title, please. So I need an inspirational title that sums up 2024 along our path. How about that? Could you send it to stories@photowalk.show, please? stories@photowalk.show. Why don't we throw in a show flask for the most inspirational one? How about that? I've got a few to post out actually in the next week. If you haven't had yours yet, don't worry. It's I was waiting for a new delivery of the new ones, so they will be wending their way to you by sleigh or pigeon post, one of the two. But if you could get a title in, that would be fantastic, and that's the one that we'll use for next week. You'll have to get your thinking socks pulled up though, because we're actually. Oh look, there's a swan right in the reeds here. Pups, move on. Come on, go on, move on. You and swans don't mix. This way. Yeah, because we're already starting to. I say we, me and Pups. I'm already starting to record the show. Right, the first of my 3 guests. I linked up with a friend of the show, actually, Andrew Gifford, a fair while back, and for reasons that become apparent during our chat, this conversation, this recording, was planned and in the diary, then moved, then planned, then moved, a few times, actually, before we finally got a chance to chat at the start of this week, and I'm so pleased we did. I really am. ME is a complex chronic illness characterised by extreme fatigue, cognitive difficulties and other symptoms that worsen after physical or mental exertion. And that's the one sentence describer for something that is, I think, wildly misunderstood by both those who still unkindly and unjustly suggest, oh, it's all in the mind. Get out, take a walk, have a sleep. And even some people still in the medical profession. One of my best childhood friends during the latter part of his high school education, so we're going back 40 years or so now, suffered from this, which at the time I'd never heard of. I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. I had no comprehension of why we couldn't meet or socialise in the way that we once did. And I didn't know this, actually, before Andrew told me after we'd finished the conversation we had, but it's widely believed that Florence Nightingale suffered from a condition resembling ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, as it's also known. She experienced, after returning from the Crimean War, she experienced debilitating fatigue, pain, and other symptoms that left her mostly bedridden for decades after. quote, "While the term ME did not exist during her time, many historians and medical experts have retrospectively suggested that her symptoms align with this condition," close quote. So Andrew will explain in the first few minutes or so what and how this affects him personally in a physical sense, because I think that's important for the context of this story. But then our conversation turns to the photography in his life and how one shaky picture he took as a lad on a school trip with his mum's camera that he borrowed has blossomed into a relationship with photography that's now the most important way that he has to communicate his message and his existence to the outside world. This week's first guest on the Photo Walk is Andrew Gifford. Andrew, do you mind me asking about ME? It's a base question to start with, an understanding question, because chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, as an overarching subject, what is it? And I know that might seem to you a daft question, because you really know firsthand how it affects you. But I still think it's not like it was perceived, I think, in the very early days of people becoming aware of it. Like, oh, why don't you just take a sleep? I think people have become a bit more wizened to it. But it's still not understood, is it?
The science is complex. It's an invisible disease.
Yeah.
It's non-contagious. Typically, people who have ME have a viral onset. So the body's normal mechanisms of processing energy delivery go haywire as a result of a destructive insult. That insult could be viral. It could be a high degree of toxicity. Yeah. So somebody who's drinking toxic water or eating toxic food. Also, you can end up in ME, which is it's a broad term for basically mitochondrial dysfunction.
Right.
So every single organ in our body is constructed of cells. The analogy would be if you imagine the cell being like a motor car. Each cell in our body that makes that organ needs to get power into the cell for the cell to function. So we have these mechanisms which has a fascinating history. There are mitochondria, and they are what translates the glucose from our bloodstream into our cell. So all of your organs, your brain, your heart, your liver, your lungs, your muscles are all powered, like the electronic signaling, the delivery of glucose, which is translated into a molecule called ATP, which is basically a sugar.
Yeah.
In ME and also in other conditions where the mitochondria is implicated. So a virus typically would come in, you'd have the acute period, the virus would have its fun, but during that massively disruptive period, the mitochondria themselves can get into a state where they're just not booting up and functioning. So when people say they feel tired, they are literally living in a dysbiosis state where you can eat food, you can sleep, you can look and appear well, but your body at a cellular level is dysfunctional.
Not functioning. I'm intrigued by toxicity being mentioned. I've just started reading a book I've had for about a year. It's about UPF, ultra-processed foods, and the toxicity of foods in our life that once weren't there. And ME is by no means a new, quote-unquote, invention. But it does seem to be something that is more a part of our lives now than it once was.
I think there's chemical insults which... there are tens of thousands of chemicals which are human created, that are fabricated, that are not normal to our environment.
Yeah.
So linking that through to mitochondrial impairment, everybody has a certain toxicity level through the tap water, through the food, through drinking beer, through whatever we're doing. All of those things have a certain loading on our system, our liver, etc. So often with ME, people are merrily leading their lives. They might be super active, they might have super busy careers, they might have an innocent but accidental exposure to a toxic load. In ME, what can happen is your body has a certain set of demands, and then the virus can be the last, like the straw that breaks the camel's back, tipping that person into a state whereby body's just not booting up. Now, if you're a busy person, You maybe have work obligations, family obligations, social obligations. You may be a fitness buff. You maybe not realise that this virus, which was quite mild in the acute phase, seemingly just a cold or something, actually can be wreaking havoc, which may not come to surface for weeks, months, years. And the cruel irony of ME is that anybody can end up in this state. I think people who have like a predisposition, within like a DNA basis, that science is not yet settled. But certainly people, developing ME, as we've seen in long COVID. Yeah. So long COVID is very similar to ME. So ME is basically just long virus.
The prognosis then for sufferers is that what will happen? The mists clear as inexplicably as they appeared? Or am I greatly simplifying that?
It isn't for everybody then set for life.
No.
The body is always trying to work towards homeostasis. The body is always trying to rebalance its immune system, readdress its dysbiosis, its dysfunction. People do recover.
Yeah.
Some people lose decades and decades of their life. ME very sadly also does take the lives of some people. So we've had this very difficult period in medicine whereby there's been a lot of implication that there is it is psychosomatic in its origin, which is absolutely biologically, demonstrably proven not to be the case. But for the institutions where the science is not yet crystal clear with a single bullet around how to treat and cure ME, we have a situation whereby patients are looking to these institutions for ways to get better. And those institutions, if they are not geared up to have multidisciplinary, multi-departmental, joined up functional medicine approaches, you can have the experience where it feels like you're sitting on the shelf waiting for science to pull a cure out of its hat. Now, one of the cruel things about ME is the people who suffer it, I don't know the percentage, but let's say near on 100% will not have a medical background. I have 2 NVQs to my name, and you have to suddenly have a basic foundation understanding of cellular level metabolism. So thank God for the internet, because the community is amazing. The resources available online are just phenomenal. And one of the things that this condition has shown me is good still exists on the internet. And I'm very grateful for it. Yeah.
You asked before we recorded today, you said, if you want to do this in Vision, we can. At the moment, I don't record these in Vision. We look at each other just because it's good for communication, but I am forever moving towards that in Vision interview experience. Looking at you today, the interesting thing is, and maybe this is something we should come back to do another time when we've started doing the Envision ones, is I would look at you, Andrew Gifford, and say, wait, he looks comfortable today. Everything looks fine. But what folk don't know is that it's taken us 3 weeks to get to this conversation.
Yeah, you typically will see an ME person on their good day. So ME has different manifestations and different stages, if you like, or different degrees of disease burden. So moderate ME has a similar disease burden to stage 4 cancer. So mild ME, you can just about hold down a full, perhaps more likely part-time job.
Yeah.
Moderate ME, you likely don't ever leave the house. But you can shuffle to the sofa, you can wash yourself typically. You might need some support. Severe ME is typically bedbound.
Right.
So when I first emailed Neil, I said it was been really good to go back through the first episodes of Photo Walk, because first it's been really, a sense of community and a sense of vicarious living. So ME biologically, if anybody listening is a fitness fan and you've ever hit the wall, or bonked as it's called, so that's when strenuous exercise, the demands of that have exceeded what the energy mechanism in your bloodstream is able to deliver. So this is called when runners or athletes
hitting the wall. Yeah.
They're not extracting the glucose to generate into their cells to function their body. So imagine if you've hit the wall, you're coming down with the flu, you ran a half marathon yesterday, you partied all night, you drank and you haven't slept. Like, I would say that's about moderate ME.
Wow. I think I have more of an understanding now than I did when we first started speaking. Let's talk about the photography. When does the photography start to play a role? It plays an incredible role now, as you're trying to explain to others what ME feels like pictorially. It is, I have to say, some of the most powerful work and I genuinely mean this, powerful work I've seen as a mechanism to describe what you're going through, which will come through and too.
Yeah.
But as a photographer, when does the whole story start there?
Primary school, a trip to Ely Cathedral.
Right.
I took Mum's Instamatic camera.
I did the Ely Cathedral thing.
And I have a very wonky picture of Ely Cathedral up at the Tower of Pisa. So we were a National Geographic reading household.
Yes,
and I think the exposure to good photography from, the age of being able to sit and read a National Geographic magazine has been embedded within me. So childhood, teens, 20s fishing. Dad's Olympus OM1 35mm camera I borrowed for fishing, and then rediscovered photography in my late 20s. And had a 7-month round the world backpacking trip, and photography led that basically. I went off and had the excuse of being very observant and nosy about the world. And then photography was somewhat of a back seat till about 5 years ago. And then 2 years ago, really, I thought, well, this might be my first and last long-term photography project. So I suppose the spark was the dawning realization that if I didn't make this photographic work about ME, it would continue to be an invisible illness. 2 years ago, nearly, I set the ambition to make photographs that I would feel represented my own experience. I have since increased my ambition that I would like this to become political. I have an aspiration that the work is seen by people who influence policy and set budget. I have decided I'm going to donate the project as a whole to the Open Medicine Foundation, which is the biggest ME and long COVID specific research organisation. The founder and chief scientist, let's say, of that charity has a son called Whitney Defoe, whose pictures are available on Instagram and are truly harrowing. Whitney is very severe, bedbound, tube fed. I wanted to supplement the moderate stage ME, which is housebound, not bedbound, but, living a very reduced existence. My hope is that work is then seen more widely by the public, but also by people who have influence.
Well, let me quote an Insta piece that you wrote, and I do want to talk about some separate pictures that are on your Instagram. Most mornings through winter, I sit here by the patio doors waiting for first light. My whole head and mind feels under pressure, inflamed and low-key poisoned. I rehydrate, practice breath holds and gentle breathing exercises, waiting for the fog to lift just enough to go make breakfast without too much clumsiness and frustration. It's very hard to imagine this fog. You call it a gluiness, and I think perhaps through your pictures that gluiness comes through.
Yeah, I heard recently that the way cyanide poisoning works in its mechanism is it prevents ATP from reaching or being circulated within the cell effectively. So when I say I feel like my body is full of glue, low-key poisoned, I obviously cannot compare. I've not had a mild cyanide poisoning. But as an analogy, it feels like my body is, just toxic. And my thoughts don't come easy. Words and sentences are often muddled. I'm clumsy. Coordination can be off. Early on, I wondered if, I actually had early onset Parkinson's or dementia, Alzheimer's. Right. Such was my muddle. And I have a real empathy for people that have those conditions, because it is very unsettling to know you're not yourself and not really know why.
The photographs that are, I'm going to call them in the fog. It's like they're photographed through a sheet of glass that's had something spread across it. It's an extraordinary idea that you had to describe that feeling. These are self-portraits. As you say, sometimes the feeling is such that creatively you don't feel you have much to give. These must be taking everything out of you to execute.
Yeah, my analogy is, Neil, that it's a 365 project where I know that even the 6.5 is likely beyond me. Photography is massive. It's fascinating. It's beautiful. It's as much or as little as you'd like to make it.
Yeah.
And that's so much of its charm. Photography has given me so much because I can listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
You know, I can work my way through YouTubes. I have a fairly decent photo book library that I can sort of turn to. I can just be in my general bumbling about the house existence and have like this gentle tick over of creativity, which ties into observation appreciation. It ties into like metaphor. It ties into questioning perception. Photography has given me something to do. It has given me a chance to demonstrate I exist. It's given me a chance to hopefully create a body of work that means less stigma for others in the future. It's a weird feeling because you're not quite sure if it's your first and also your last photo project. I'm careful not to put too much self-expectation and weight on it. But yeah, photography has been incredible to return to. Yeah.
I was showing this photograph the other day to a friend of mine, and he said that it was perhaps the best description of Emmy that he'd seen in a photograph. And it's one of your most recent ones. It was called Collecting Dust.
Yes.
It's you with your feet up on is it a settee or
That's a sofa, a lazy boy sofa.
The irony of that word. Yeah. So your feet are up. You can see a radiator behind that. There's a light, which
it's a sad lamp. But the winters are difficult. So it's a daylight lamp and lots of dust that's collected shamefully.
All the dust is on the floor. And that describes the domestic chores you talk about. Where do these ideas come from?
I have a lot of inputs. I listen to podcasts voraciously. I have a YouTube habit. I have a photo book collection on the shelves, and I watch a lot of like good cinema. So I have a Blu-ray collection that I've been slowly building up, and really it's the summation of all of that. So I'm interested in, there's a quote by Minor White, which is, and I will murder it, which is about photographing not only what it is, but what else it is. So early in the ideation, if you like, of the project was stumbling across the work of Peter Fraser. So Peter was a peer of Martin Parr, a very accomplished British photographer, mainly documentary work, but with an art or metaphorical slant. And his work, which is very much about material, which is about objects. I mean, so much of my existence is repetitive, is day-to-day, is mundane. I wanted really to kind of build in a sense of these things that I interact with, like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
So I started the project with lots of object and still life, mainly because my Emmy was not quite as stable 2 years ago as it is now, and I've begun to be able to move on to the slightly more complex sort of set piece, environmental portrait type images. So a lot of the early work was still lifes or found objects used as metaphor.
Robert Darch, you've been working with Robert. Tell me who he is and why it's been important to work with him.
So Robert is a British Devon-based documentary photographer, MFA in photography, also lectures and mentors photography students mainly in the Southwest. Robert has made some really, I felt, really important work around, for example, Brexit. He's building up a body of work about a fictitious place. His childhood and his romantic perception of Devon, where they've returned to as a family and where Robert now lives. I discovered Robert on a podcast and realised he'd also had ME. Robert has recovered. He had ME during his undergraduate. He'd had a small stroke and then hot on the heels of that ME. And so I was very open for a mentor, and having realised what Rob has been through and also that he has come through this, he still suffers some fatigue residual. So Robert has become a mentor. We've had, I think, 3 sessions and we are overdue a catch up and 4th session.
You've had to adapt your photography, I'm sure, to accommodate your condition. Techniques, tools, the way you use the camera. Explain that when it comes to your photography practice now.
Yeah, my core strength has gone.
Yeah.
I used to be as fit as a fiddle, keen cyclist, keen runner, a little bit of gym, indoor climbing. I mean, I look back at my physique and realise my power and strength that was there before the ME drained all of that away. So now everything is tripod based because I cannot, in indoor light, even with image stabilization, hold, a concise composition at any kind of reliable shutter speed. So by nature, I'm impatient. I'm a make it happen, get things done, let's go kind of person. And so the tripod has really helped me be more conscious, more respectful of the composition I really want, more reflective. So tripod based. Often the idea or the concept is being hatched over days, weeks, months. I have in my phone, in my notes, maybe 36 concepts or ideas to manifest.
Right.
And then by virtue of stumbling across them in a way that I think can bring that to life, a conversation with Sharon, my partner, something on the TV, watching a film, a photo book, the idea then begins to flourish, and then I'm really waiting for that to coincide with both my capacity and the conditions or light that I think might make sense for it. So it's a fine balance between control and chance. So by nature, I'm a controlling person, but I'm also quite instinctive, quite in the moment, and somewhere in there is where the photo happens. So I will often come into a composition with quite a high degree of control, and then I'm beginning to work up the concept or the approach to the composition and allowing heavily for chance. I wouldn't like to put a number on it, but I think the chance photos are featuring heavily in the project, but they couldn't have got there without me squeezing the toothpaste of ideas heavily to try and get to that environment where chance can pleasantly surprise.
You mentioned Sharon a couple of times, and you mentioned her within the project quite a lot as well. Has she taken part in the photographic side of this as well?
Sharon is my Debbie McGee.
Right.
So she is perfect because she doesn't have an arts background, but she has a natural clarity about her perception of something. So I'm very lucky with Sharon. She has a sciences background and a caring nature, and we have so much fun together in spite of us both having a lot on our plates. So often Sharon, if it's a self-portrait, I will be talking about the concept with Sharon beforehand. We will then use the smartphone camera to mock up what that might look like, so that instead of me setting up my big camera, my tripod, and her feeling under lots of pressure to try and actually press the shutter on the photo that I've set up and created and feature in.
Yes.
So we found this kind of this way of working where we'll mock up with the smartphone first. I'm usually cooked by then. Sharon's patience has run dry because I'm effing and blinding, as well as trying to act like some sort of stoic muse study of myself. We then have to pack down, get back to a place of peace and love, and then 2 or 3 days later we can do it properly with a tripod.
Sharon, as you alluded to there, also has her own chronic health conditions. So
Sharon has rheumatoid arthritis, which is basically pain and fatigue for her. Yeah. So we are a fine pair between us.
Well, there's an understanding.
Good understanding
between the two of you. That's for sure. The work is extraordinary. It really is. And I know at the moment, as I look through engagement, that it's a growing number, and the more people that get to hear about it, and this opportunity to get this out into the community as well is really, really important to you. What's your hope for it? And I know you've mentioned that where you want the study to go. Are there hopes for a book? Are there hopes for interviews, for dare I say a YouTube channel, since you mentioned it? I know that would be an exhausting thing in itself.
Yeah, it's a good question because it's all thought in process. I want the work to be democratic.
Yeah.
I don't want the work to be the preserve of middle-class photo books. I regard myself as a middle-class photo book hoarder,
right.
But I think photography can exist in a bubble. So I want the work to be democratic first and foremost. I want it to be seen. I don't mean my own work. I mean any work about ME, mine or otherwise. I want it to be seen far and wide. If mine can become a part of that. So one of the beautiful things of the ME community online is I'm finding other creatives making really amazing work about ME.
Yeah.
My moon on a stick, wouldn't it be nice, is that there is a collective exhibition or a collective book of collective pieces of art, and mine plays into that, which is seen by people who actually have influence. Yeah. Everything else is icing on that cake. That's a big goal. It would be a massive undertaking, but potentially is more of a community effort that might become realistic. I think the format could suit a book. Worldwide, there's something like 17 to 20 million people with ME.
Good Lord.
So arguably there could be an appetite.
Goodness.
I've always faced that challenge of what if the work is not about boredom, but is actually boring? Where is the sweet spot between the beautiful, the interesting, and also the sublime? How off-putting are themes of repetition, the mundane? You know, there are kind of inherent challenges which are sort of truthful to the authentic experience that maybe photographically could be a little bit problematic for a non-sexy subject. However, ME is one of the last very impactful large-scale diseases which is still not well understood by science. It should be a very exciting, very fertile ground for science, and I hope that as a community of people making creative work about ME together, we can kind of help to feed into that.
Yeah. I'm interested, before I ask my final question, when I talk to a lot of folk during interviews, they'll often say, I enjoyed that was fun, or they'll have some sort of feedback at the end. This interview process that we've been through over the last 3 weeks, this last half hour has been a 3-week process, as I've said.
Yeah.
Are these sort of things exhausting to you?
I can hear as I talk to you the nerves. I can hear how afraid I sound in my voice. I'm not intellectually nervous. I'm not intellectually afraid. I'm excited, but my central nervous system is so frayed and fraught that I will now, after today, have to just rest for the entirety of the rest of today. I'm meant to be travelling home to see my mum. I haven't seen her since we lost my father at Christmas. We're meant to be doing that tomorrow, but that may well then just drift, and you end up in this weird, nebulous, no man's land, limbo land, Groundhog Day of murkiness, and it is what it is, and you do your best.
Well, I'm hoping you get a chance now to rest.
Thank you.
I don't want to take any more of your time. I do want to ask the question, and you probably will know what that question is, but I feel it has a certain resonance with you because of the importance that photography has played, particularly in the last 2 years for you. As we know from that initial wonky Ely Cathedral picture, and Andrew, I think I could raise you a wonky Ely Cathedral picture with one I took in a very similar way in Bath of a cathedral there as well, another school trip. But I am intrigued, when you think about the last 2 years in particular, what your why of photography is.
I don't have an answer, and I may not have an answer until I've retired from photography. There is a poem by W.H. Davies, which is, "What is this life if full of care we have no time to stop and stare?" And that for me is photography. I mean, we're here once, and there's some pretty cool things happening under our nose, and it's a chance to observe, appreciate, explore, interrogate. You can turn it inwards. You can have an external view, you can complicate it, you can simplify it, you can have a shared experience, it can be private. I mean, I could do 4 hours on this if I had the energy, but I may not really know until I'm ready to retire from the whole thing.
And my sincere thanks to Andrew Gifford for being my guest on the photo walk today, being my first guest. I'll leave some links on the page, obviously, to his work, and also to other reference sites where you can go and read more about this and understand the condition. The trees here, well, I'm walking along a part of the path, having waded just a moment ago through the waters of the path. I'm now on a part of the path that's completely serene. There's nobody here. Nobody daft enough to soak their foot in the waters, but we're left with a lot of look at this, pups. What's this? Left with some wonderful sticks. Let me throw this one. Well, it's no good just pulling it. The idea is that I throw, and you ready? Ready? You're echoing so much through the woodland here. Ready? Go! He won't be so good at bringing it back. He's not very good at that part of the game. Come on, pups. Bring it back. No? Fair enough. I threw a stick the other day, and the winds were very high here. I threw a stick, and it sort of came back at him. I thought, oh no. Just missed him by a smidgen. We didn't play a lot of stick for the rest of that walk, did we? Right, to your letters again. Here's one from Rikki-Paul Bunder in Australia land. Hi Neil, long-time listener, second-time writer. I feel, Ricky, my voice is starting to recover as this walk goes along. I think the voice is coming back. Come on, pups, this way. Back in March, I sent you an email about a 3,500 kilometre photo drive that I took, centred around the vast salt lakes in Australia. I thought I'd update you, especially considering your photo walks have been a significant inspiration. That's very kind of you, Rikki. It's very close to me having to hide behind the sofa at this rate. Due to significant distances and dollars involved in returning to the Salt Lakes, I've turned my attention to my local area. I live in the Macedon Ranges, which are absolutely gorgeous. I will leave some links on the page today, about 50 kilometres from Melbourne. My main mountain is a quick 15-minute drive, a small one, only about 1,000 metres above sea level, but has very diverse vegetation and quick changing weather. So every Sunday, late afternoon, I go for a walk with my camera. I made myself a few rules to make these wanderings as mindful as possible. 1. No planning. That sounds like my kind of walk, but be very careful in the mountains, particularly when the weather's a bit diverse, as you say. Number 2, all weather is good weather. That's very true. 3, 1 camera, 1 lens, no tripod. 4, no reviewing images during the shoot. Who was it? Was it my reprobate mate Mullins, or was it Giles that used to, on his digital cameras, when you couldn't turn the screen round, he'd put tape across it, so you couldn't look at the image, no matter what. And then was that 4? No reviewing. Yeah. 5. Walk, wander, and photograph what captures my attention. And then 6. Take the shot, keep wandering. This resulted in some wild weather walks, rain, snow, high winds, very low and very high temperatures. But it was also very freeing not to worry about the images and concentrate on the photo walk for the experience alone. Anyway, attached is one of the pictures. More can be viewed through the website. And Rikki, I do like this idea. I like it a lot. I'll link to your work on the show page today, of course, and thank you for the picture that also goes with your story here. I think it's a picture of mystery. That's how I see this one. And actually a picture of quiet. I can almost hear the quietness in the picture. I really can. If you look at this picture on the show page, this photo, you'll understand exactly what I mean. You can hear the silence. Well, I hear it mixed with my tinnitus. This seems to become the sound of the radiator heating in our house. Very oddly, whenever I get a cold, my tinnitus introduces a new sound to my life, and this one, strangely, is the central heating. It's like the radiator's got it's the water flowing through the radiator first thing in the morning. But I've been hearing it at like 2:30 or 3, and getting up to go downstairs. Who left the heating on? Who? Come on. Who? No. We can't be turning the heating on before you go to bed. It's supposed that's been the experience of the last week, until I finally realised it's my tinnitus and another one of those strange noises that I've picked up. Hopefully it should go soon. But I love this mindful walking with a camera idea. It's completely in my wheelhouse. It's a kind of and that way of taking the shot and then just wandering on. Take the shot, move on. Take the shot, move on. Not rushing necessarily. It's a very Eggleston-esque way of working. I think that's what William Eggleston used to do. One scene, one frame, then he would click and move on. Although I think his reason for that was also embedded in remembering where the picture was made. So if he had too many choices, lots of angles, lots of frames of the same kind of place, he'd not be able to remember where the pictures were made, and he wouldn't be able to finish notation about his own wanderings. But I do like this idea, a wandering with a camera, just with your mind open for curiosity. What was it that Marissa Roth said? I know what you're going to say, Neil. Say it with me then. Go with an open mind and an open heart. Fantastic. pups. This way. Another stick. Should we throw another stick? We just had a runner go past us a moment ago. This one, this is good. This one, I've got it. This is the one. Ready? Hold on, let's break it up a bit. No, hold on, don't grab it while I'm trying to break it. I won't be able to throw it. Well, you have that one, and I'll throw a different one. Let's do this one. Ready? Here we go. Come on. Ready? Oh, it's not gone yet. Don't run yet. Here we go. Ready? Fetch. Good flyer, that one. Just the right weight. I was walking along with Sabak a lot. A runner just came past us. Heavy breathing. He had those sort of noises that certain kinds of men make in gyms, you know. I call them the grunters, you know. Oh no, I've got to share this space with a grunter today. Put those AirPods in, and turn up max on filtering any outside sounds out. Yeah, and he just as he went past me, I thought, don't do that. I'm just recovering from my cold. I don't want yours as well. Do you remember that time during the... I've talked about this before, I know. Stop me if I've told you. Should be my bumper sticker. Where we used to throw ourselves into hedges if anybody went past us while we were walking out during COVID. You'd push yourself against a wall or a bush just so you could be as far away as you... Oh, cross the road. Oh, that was the worst thing. Crossing the road. Right, where were we, pups? Oh, yes, I'm aware that we seem to have less time this month to do photo challenges or assignments. I know the month is a long month, but it just seems there's another thing going on this month which might prevent people from taking part. But I hope you will. I might have to leave it open another week or so into January, I think. Peter Dench is our challenge setter for this month. I will tell you how to take part in just a moment's time.
The Photo Walk assignment.
So Peter, December's assignment. A one-word assignment, that's what we've been doing this year. What word are you going to surprise us with?
Well, it probably isn't a surprise, but I'll go for humour.
Ah, perfect. Come on then, talk about humour within photography. Help us a bit here to guide our ship a bit with the word humour when it comes to photography.
Well, I think it's a challenge because it is difficult to get right, and I don't see humour as taking advantage of someone or something or sneering. So it's trying to navigate that line. You know, when does something humorous or when does humour become offensive? You know, it's a subtle shift. So I think that is a challenge for people to accept.
So best of luck then. Send your pictures to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. Send one picture only, please, and make sure that your email system doesn't resize it to less than 2,500 pixels wide. There's been a few of late which have come in at 400 pixels wide. And I know it's not you. You're holding up your end of the bargain. It's your email system that's saying, oh, I'm just going to send it any old size I like. Thanks very much. If it does have a habit of doing that, just send me a full res picture and I'll do the heavy lifting to make it 2,500 pixels wide for the optimization on the website. No watermarks, please, no borders, but do include links to your social feeds, your website, your Flickr, your Glass, or wherever we can enjoy more of your work. Also, send me some thoughts about the picture if you think it helps you with the storytelling part of it. All the pictures and the stories, they go on the assignments page. So please make sure it's original work. And some of the pictures will also feature on our Photo Walk Instagram, which helps our community grow. And I'll be sure, of course, to tag back to your own profile. Right. That sounded like a long list of terms and conditions. I'll have to rewrite that and think of how to shorten it. 2025 is breathing down our necks, so it is, which is a bit forward of it, I know. It's probably why I've got this head cold. Excuse me, 2025, would you not breathe down my neck quite so much? Anyway, 2025, I am thinking of some ideas I'd like to try in 2025. And whilst the line in the sand from which to stride out is obviously Jan 1st, my tidy mind needs that kind of order in my life when it comes to projects. So it does seem to be that time of year. And I spoke only a couple of days ago to Jack Lowe, the photographer behind a massive project where he set out to photograph people from every lifeboat station in the UK and Ireland. Photographing using glass plate photography, so Victoria methods, which made it 3, 4, 5 times as hard. Anyway, I chatted to him, I caught up about that particular project, because some fantastic stuff has been happening to that of late. But during our conversation, and you'll hear that conversation in 2025, during our chat, we discussed a fabulous thing that he's doing photographically in his locality, where he lives, i.e. And it's such a delicious idea, such a simple idea, that I wanted to share it with you, in case you thought, ooh, now that's inspired me to go and do something like insert idea here. So here is Jack Lowe.
So this is I think this is perhaps one of my purest ideas in photography that I've ever had.
It's probably why it's so good.
One of the things I felt would be really unusual in our culture would be to give people something that's completely unconditional. And I love it when things are meta, in that when there are layers and layers and layers to things. So the Lifeboat Station project is layered and layered to the nth degree. It's countless, the dimensions to that project, because it now has a life of its own. But I wondered, how would it be if I made a photograph of a scene and then I make a little print of that photograph and pop it in an envelope and write on the envelope a photo for you and tape it to the place where I stood and took that picture.
So it's the actual place, isn't it?
It's the actual place where I took the picture. Because already there's some wonderful layers. There are things that prick the consciousness, because somebody walking past it and seeing it, they immediately see something that shouldn't be there. It's something that's kind of burst the bubble of normality. There's an envelope taped to, I don't know, like a phone box or one of those broadband innocuous boxes. That's
sometimes it's just you've just left them on brick walls or the side.
Yes, yeah, or taped to a bollard, or perched at a railway station or something like that. And then they walk up to it and see it says in handwriting, a photo for you. And then open the envelope, and it's a picture of the scene they're standing in. One of the things I'll never do is I'll never stop to see if somebody picks it up. I'm very much into releasing outcomes these days. It's one of the things that actually helps me to navigate the world more easily, is to not have these grand visions for the future. It's actually to go the opposite way and release outcomes. Like to do something I feel is right, that resonates with me and that might resonate with my community, and release outcomes. So I just stick those or plant those envelopes and walk away.
Do you put a telephone number on them or an email address?
The only thing I put on there is when you first open the envelope, you see the back of the photograph, which I've mounted on. It's mounted on a nice little bit of card.
Okay.
So on the back of the card, I write #photo for you. So that if anybody wants to join the dots,
they can.
Once I've planted the picture, I then take a picture of it and post a photograph of the envelope. And my caption is really simple. It says something like, a wee gift for whoever finds it. And it's got the what 3 words location of the envelope. Do you know what 3 words?
I do. In fact, I think you were the first person that introduced me to it.
Well, that's good. I hope what 3 words are listening and heard that.
I tell you what, we'll clip it and we'll send it to them.
Yes. People also have to know what 3 words is. I'm not spoon feeding people, you see. I don't want to spoon feed people with this. I think we're spoon fed so much. I want people to think a little bit. I want people's consciousness to be pricked a little bit. I want people to do a little bit of thinking. Well, what's this what 3 words address? And if they aren't familiar with it and do a little bit of investigation, they find out it's a really fantastic, accurate way within a 3 meter square to find the location of something.
Anywhere in the world, on this globe.
Yeah, that's right. Anywhere on the planet. And their reward, if they're quick off the mark, will be to find this envelope. It's like geocaching, I guess, isn't it?
I was going to say it's a step up from geocaching,
and it's a completely unconditional gift for them. That in my mind, I wonder if they're just propping it on a mantelpiece or on their desk or by their computer at work or something.
In my mind, I was imagining people picking these up like something out of Mission Impossible. They've got it says a photo for you, and they're looking around thinking, What's about to happen? What's in the envelope? I just think it's a delicious idea.
Thank you very much. I've got plenty more up my sleeve because while the exhibition in Greenwich has been coming to a close, I've been quite full on with that and up and down to London quite a few times. But I've got quite a few printed out just on the desk here, ready to go. Because I just love it. It's so simple. It's quite exciting for me, and I love that it isn't about me. People don't know it's Jack Lowe.
Right.
They will have no idea about the Lifeboat Station project, this other epic thing I've made. But they're just receiving this lovely little photograph. And, these are photographs that are made on my iPhone. From my point of view, the delicious thing is it's going the other way from the Lifeboat Station project. The Lifeboat Station project is probably about the greatest extent you can go to with the logistics of how to make a photograph.
This is going the other way.
Yeah, this is going the other way. Just an iPhone and a Canon selfie printer. Do you know the Canon selfie printers?
I don't know the Canon one, but I know the selfie printers very well.
I mean, it's just here, and I'm just reaching for a 6x4 print.
Yeah.
Makes it beautiful. It's a dye sublimation printer, so it's not inkjet, so it's continuous tone. Just beautiful little glossy prints, and I just mount them on a little piece of card, which suddenly makes them into a thing. It makes a thing, and into an envelope, and that's that. And then to tape it onto the spot where I made the photograph, which means then that I quite enjoy thinking ahead. So if I'm going back down to London, I will make, as a quick example, I made one of the Cutty Sark, a picture of Cutty Sark that I took earlier in the year. I thought, I'm going back there. I could do a photo for you, or I could do several photos for you around Greenwich. And I took the prints with me in envelopes and then planted them back where I'd stood and taken those photographs. It isn't just for my neighbourhood here in Newcastle upon Tyne. It's wherever I go to, because I'm always shooting photographs on my iPhone. And it highlights that you can come up with wonderful ideas that are just that, just wonderful ideas, just really simple ideas that are quite counterculture as well. And yes, I mean, I can imagine people say, yeah, but where's the money? Do you know what? There isn't any.
No.
This is not about money. It's not about that at all. It's just about giving somebody an unconditional gift and hoping that they feel good about it, and that perhaps they're feeling a bit grey on their way to work, but they've had this little ray of light
that they found
in an envelope that they've just found, and it's just for them, and they don't know where it's come from. All they know, hopefully, is that they like it, and perhaps it might get their cogs turning as to where on earth it's come from and how it got there.
My thanks to Jack Lowe. What a super idea. Next week, the why question, which, by the way, Jack did answer during our conversation to come. And his response, comes to a full stop at a moment I wasn't quite expecting. You tease, Neil, you tease, I know. It was quite an interesting one, very interesting one, actually. In terms of projects for 2025, I thought I might share some ideas on the extra mile this week, but also my guest is Asim Khan from Geneva, who is a photographer who thinks alternatively. Suffice to say, I am thinking of grabbing an old scanner and ripping the lid off it. Blimey, Neil, have you turned into Violent Santa? No, although there is 100 minutes of my life I'll not be able to claw back. I am sticking to reruns of Miracle on 34th in the future. But yes, it's a fantastic idea that he shares on the show. What? I did think it was a fantastic idea, Pups. Did you? Now, I did say we were guest rich this week, and we certainly are. My second story of resilience today, and why photography is just so bloody important. Hang on, kids, cover your ears. That film clearly affected Neil. No, but it is, really. The conversations this year have reminded me, not that I needed reminding probably, but have reminded me that this photography thing that we do is a wonderfully layered thing in a way that really helps us understand the world. I know to some that statement would be a little bit woo-woo, like you're over-explaining the whole thing. It's just a snap, Neil, isn't it? Just a snap. Like that guy on the bike I encountered all those years ago when I was doing my photography NVQ. Laid on my belly next to a puddle making work for a reflection project. Quite happy I was. And then this chap purposely splashes through on his bike because he was agitated for some reason by me laying there taking a photograph of a puddle. What's the fuss, mate? What's the fuss? It's a puddle. A puddle, that's all it is. But yes, this photography thing, it's just a wonderfully layered thing that we have this opportunity to to share our view and our experiences, as Andrew Gifford showed us earlier in our conversation, of the world in which we live. So, Why Am I Sad by Dana Stirling is a poignant and visually evocative exploration of human emotions. It weaves together the most extraordinary portraits and delicate still lifes to create a narrative that's, well, it's deeply personal, that's for sure, as you'll hear in a moment's time. But I think it's universally relatable as well. It's a subject we talk often about, sadness and vulnerability. They are, or at least can be, partners in the way that we experience things. And my chat with Dana now explores that. And also how photography can be a conduit for the good when you don't necessarily feel so light-footed in the world. So yes, a thought-provoking subject with a why at the end that I think is just perfect.
It's estimated, Dana, that 280 million people worldwide cope, struggle, deal with depression. It's something we've addressed on the show before. We certainly don't shy from discussions about mental health. I think it's important in terms of this book, though, and the work on the subject that you've made, to talk about your own depression, from where that comes. And it was from growing up, wasn't it? Your story.
Yes. So for me, I grew up to a family of immigrants, and I think that played a role in itself. So my parents are originally from England, and then they came to Israel back in '88. They tried to find a place where they felt more safe. They were trying to avoid anti-Semitic attacks that happened in their local synagogue, and they just wanted to feel more safe. So they moved, and I was the first child out of 3 born in Israel. I was born to a very different culture, different language, different environment. So my house was very British.
Yeah.
My parents spoke only English. We spoke English in the house, but outside I grew up very Middle Eastern, in a sense, like my friends talked Hebrew. I went to school talking Hebrew. The culture was much different, the food, the environment. So I think that already created some sort of imbalance in my life, in the sense that my home and my outside environment were just so different from each other. And then in addition to that, having already the issue of having this identity crisis, right, between the two cultures, not really feeling British enough, not really feeling Israeli enough. I never felt really connected to any of the cultures. My mother has battled with eating disorders and clinical depression for her entire life. And I think a lot of her issues came from her upbringing, and also moving to a different country, I think also really affected her.
Yeah.
So she really suffered from clinical depression, but it took me as a teenager years to understand that that's what's happening, right? Because my family has this idea of shame. So like you don't really talk about these things, and you especially don't talk about it with other people outside the house. So whatever happens in the house stays in the house. Like your family matter is very private. I couldn't talk with anyone inside the house or outside the house about it. So I think kind of growing up with a parent like that and not really understanding the meaning and the repercussion of having someone like that in your life. It's only when you're older you kind of look back and you understand how much it affected you and how much it was a burden or how much it was defining of who you are as a person. So I think a part of doing this work was looking back at this time in my life and understanding how it shaped who I am as a person and how it manifested itself as an adult. And for many years, it was just me and my parents, because my siblings are older. So I had many years of just being by myself, and my room kind of became this little bubble. And I think that's why photography for me was such an amazing escape, because I started photographing inside this house of like feeling that I couldn't communicate with people. I couldn't talk, I couldn't write, I couldn't do anything that expressed it. So photography was suddenly this amazing outlet.
Well, this is where the photography comes in, I know, in that room. But how did the camera happen to be in your hands, and how did you think, hang on, or find, this gives me an outlet, this gives me a creative, this gives me purpose?
I think in the beginning it started as just, I had like like those small little digital cameras, like the pocket cameras that you just carry around. And And I just kind of like documented friends and like just very casual, fun things. But I always had it. And I took pictures of my friends all the time. And then like I just started playing around, started taking like weird still lifes in my house, just very casually. Like I didn't even think about it. And then towards like the end of my high school, and I think I started finding it to be more enjoyable. Like I started to really gravitate to like actually enjoying taking photos. And then I met my then boyfriend, now husband, Yoav. He started teaching me like very basic understandings of photography. He at the time was also pursuing photography as an undergrad. So he really kind of helped me understand photography, and I got my first DSLR. And then I started really trying to approach it in a more professional way, trying to understand the technical aspect of photography. And then I still felt like a little frustrated because I felt like my technical ability and my need out of photography weren't really matching in the beginning. So that's when I decided to pursue photography in my undergrad as well. And I think going to undergrad, learning photography, I started with, black and white, traditional darkroom photography. And I think for me, that was pivotal because I think it taught me the technical aspect of photography, understanding light and shadows and composition. But it also really kind of was the first time that I had to think of photography as an art form, as a way of expression and not just as a hobby. And then in my second year, when we moved to color, that's when the spark kind of like lit up. And for me, like color photography has been my biggest passion. I've never gone back to black and white because I just find color to be the such an important part of this language that I created. Yeah, I think that's kind of how I started. And then since then, it's just been kind of building.
With the photography and the color in your life, then let's talk about this book. I think some of the why behind it is far more obvious now that you've talked about your parents and the room, finding the camera, finding an outlet, and then finding colour. But tell me about the early stages of considering this book, what it was going to be, and why you made it. Why a book about... It was not about depression, but it covers the subject of it.
Right. I think that's why it's kind of like hard sometimes to talk about the book, because it's about depression, but it doesn't depict depression in the sense that it's not an illustration of what depression might look.
No. There's no black dog sort of feeling about the book.
Right. And I think that's kind of who I am as a person. I think it's about, and it kind of talks to the cover of the book, this idea of almost having a mask. So portraying happiness versus how you feel inside, and how easy it is to kind of, with a very small, tear and a switch in the happy face, it turns into a sad face, right?
Yeah.
Because every happy face is also a sad face. So I think that's where the book comes from this idea of just the duality of happy and sad and the irony of life, and finding humor in something that's also a little dark. And that, as humans, we have all these emotions at the same time. And I think for me, my melancholy or my sadness isn't necessarily black and white or gray, right? For me, it is filled with beautiful things, happy faces, beautiful color, but it's almost like this like cloud of heaviness, of sadness that kind of still lingers. So I think it's a part of who I am always, and it does affect and it does shape and it does kind of guide my photography. Yeah. But the book isn't about depression in that aspect of what we think of depression. I think it's more about finding yourself within this melancholy, finding who you are, understanding it, challenging it, asking questions. So I think for me, the book really started back in, I think, like 2019. That was kind of like a pivotal point.
All right, yeah.
Where I took the first photo of the book, which is the purple flowers with the red driveway reflector. Yes. And that's kind of why I also put it as the first image in the book, and also a little isolated from everything, because for me, that was the moment where something changed. So obviously I've been going through like tough times here, and like, still moving from another country to this country, being an immigrant yet again, going through immigration process, which is very stressful, and just being in a new place. And after my MFA, I felt a little lost. I wasn't sure what to do. So I was going through kind of like this period where I wasn't really photographing. I felt very down, and it created this loop where I couldn't photograph because I was sad. I was sad because I wasn't photographing. And I I didn't know how to get out of it. And then in 2019, we took a trip to the West Coast, which was the first time I went. And it was just remarkable. Like, it's like a different America over there. And it was so amazing because on one hand, I was really sad. I was having a lot of like challenges mentally, but like I was going through the coast, seeing the water, seeing this amazing landscape and feeling very inspired by it. I was slowly taking more photos and I was getting like excited. And then I saw that photo. And for me, it was like, okay, photography, this is what I'm meant to do. Photography is my passion, my love, because that photo sparked this like feeling of confidence, but also like I almost fell in love again with photography. And it made me understand that, okay, you know, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to have these challenges, but photography has always been there for me. And how can I use it to overcome? And once I started to kind of think of this notion of being sad and coping with it and how it affects my photography and how everything is intertwined, it actually became easier to photograph because I had almost like a new purpose of understanding why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it kind of, it sparked something in me. And I think that was the moment where I started to kind of think of the idea. But the book itself came much later than 2019. It was a few years after I already started taking more photos. But I kept having this conversation with myself about depression and talking about it and feeling it in the work and feeling that I want to talk about it. So once I decided to make the book, I knew that I wanted to call it Why Am I Sad? Because it was the question I kept asking myself when taking these photos and when I'm thinking of this work.
Well, you call it a visual diary. And by what you're explaining there are pictures where I think, oh, that's a sad picture. That doesn't evoke happiness, that particular picture. But then there are other pictures. I mean, the obvious one's probably that window full of bright pink balloons that make you smile. So I assume that as we read through the book, we can read, I don't want this to sound crass, but we can read your emotions, perhaps.
I think so. I think it's also interesting because, like, you know, for me, the book with the photo with the pink balloons is actually the opposite of happy, which is interesting because I think that's why I love talking to people about the work, because I think people see things differently because obviously you're coming from your own perspective, your own life, your own emotions, right? So you read the work in a way that makes sense for you. That's kind of the reason why I gravitate towards still life so much, is because it's such an amazing way to tell a story that's so open without being too heavy-handed, too guided, and allowing the viewer to really kind of embrace the moment with you. Because I think people see things in a different way, and I think still life is more challenging sometimes for people to read because they need to, quote unquote, kind of like decode things, right? But I think for me, that's what's fun. That's what makes it more exciting, because I feel like I'm giving something to a viewer that they can see from my perspective, but they also bring their own feeling to it. So for me, the pink balloon is not sad. It's not happy. It's more kind of feeling a little trapped.
Isn't that funny?
You know, like,
I read it in an entirely different fashion. I read it
which is great.
A summer's day, you passing by, seeing something and thinking, oh, okay. Well, that makes what happened yesterday not seem so bad today.
Right.
That's the way I saw it.
Yeah. I think for me, it's just like there's a irony in it. It's like pink balloons are so pretty. There's something, like you said, something so happy and cheerful about them. But when you think about it, they're kind of like trapped.
Yes, they are.
Inside a little window where they can't fly. They can't. Yeah. So I think the whole book is filled with these ideas of metaphors and symbolism that kind of, that's the play. That's the give and take I'm having with the viewer. It's like I'm giving them something and they can read it the way they feel. The importance of this work is about talking about mental health, but also allowing people to bring their own struggle into it, because, you know, my mental health issues and struggles is not the same as another person, right? Like me and my mother are similar in many ways, but very different in others, because she, for example, never found a way to cope. She never found something to ground her, to help her, she never found passion in life. She never found a spark. So she really, like, her depression really at her personality and who she is as a person. And you can kind of see over the years, like, how she lost herself. I think that's why it's important to talk about it, because people see life in a different way, but it's important to talk, because I learned that if you stay in this shameful place of just like not talking, not sharing with others, you feel very isolated, alone, and it's very hard to get out of it if you don't have support. So I'm lucky enough to have support, and I have an outlet, and I think that is something that really helped me.
Why do you think photography and creative endeavours are so important when it comes to depression? As you say, you have the outlet that your mother sadly didn't have. But why is this outlet so important? Why are creative endeavours, to use that word again, such a powerful, potent mix when it comes to dealing with this?
I think people find their own path in life. I think we're creative people, so it just helps us be creative. When I was growing up, my sister and my grandfather both knew how to draw really beautifully. And I always felt almost jealous and I had an animosity towards it.
So many photographers say that. They can't draw.
Yeah.
Can't draw for toffee is something that I hear so often. It's I haven't got a drawing in me, but I can take a photograph and make a photograph.
Exactly. So I had that. And so I thought, okay, so how can I be creative? Maybe I'll write. But I'm terrible at writing. That's completely not my thing. And I felt like I needed a creative outlet, but I couldn't find it. And then photography just came so naturally. It was easy in the sense that I had access to it. And once you learn the technical aspect, you can really allow yourself to go crazy with the creative side of it. Yeah. So it was kind of like a natural progression into photography. But I think having a creative outlet, or just any outlet, whatever you kind of find, is just having a purpose in life.
Yeah.
I think for me, the dark times that I had were those times exactly when I felt lost, right? Like when you don't feel like you have a ground to stand on, you're not sure where you're going. So having this project, having this book, having something to really kind of guide me and lead me and help me focus on something really helped my mental health. And it really helped me kind of not spiral. I think that's why creative outlet can be powerful. It just lets you focus on something and take something negative and take something heavy and dark and make something beautiful out of it and make something that has importance. And then if you share it with people and they resonate with it, it gives you this warm feeling of, okay, I had to go through something in order to share it, and now people can talk about it, and it has a positive impact. So I think that's why it's important to have some sort of outlet. It's just a way to communicate and share your feelings with others without bottling it all up and kind of like allowing it to make you spiral, I think.
We talk a lot on this show about social media. Social media and mental health, of course, they're very uncomfortable bed partners. It does play a strong role in mental health for the good and for the bad. Problems like comparison, anxiety, fear of missing out, not to mention the addictive nature of it. That's something we talk so often about. Yet it's also this sort of essential reference tool for many creative people, and a wonderful place to be. How do you balance your relationship with it?
It's a good question. Sometimes I don't and sometimes I do. I think I, like many other artists, struggle with this idea of, like you're saying, comparison. And I think, obviously on social media, we try and put the best foot forward, right? Like to show our success, our accomplishments, to show that we've done it in life, that we have exhibitions, we have this going on, and just to show we're successful, right? But, in the end of the day, all artists have rejection letters piled up in their emails and maybe failed projects or just failed relationships that they had with people. So I think we all have things that are less exciting or less pretty in the back end. And I think for me, the more I started talking about those aspects on social media, for me, I felt like I was able to connect with people even more. Because back in 2000, I can't remember now the year, I think it was 17 maybe, I did a rejection letter book for school.
Right.
I shared it with people and it kind of got such a great response. And people were like, oh my God, yes, finally, let's talk about it. Let's talk about rejection. Let's talk about this idea of failure.
Yes.
And that was the beginning of my journey with kind of sharing these things that are uncomfortable, things that are awkward a little bit, things that are not as pretty and, tied with a bow. Because I think everyone's going through the same thing. But if everyone is so afraid and shameful about it, then we all stay in our own little bubble and we think we're the only ones failing or the only ones getting rejection letters. But then you realize like all of your peers, the people you believe in their work and think they're creative and talented, they're also getting rejected from the same things maybe. So I think the more you talk about these things, the more you're transparent, the more you create a community of people who kind of have the same interest but the same struggle. I think that's when social media can be really powerful. And I think for me, especially with this book, because I did a Kickstarter for a good chunk of the revenue that I needed to create the book, I think without social media, I don't think I could.
You could have done it.
Do it. Yeah. Because like the community really came and stood behind me, right? So I felt like, it manifested in an online social media way, but it's a community of people who are all photographers, artists that believed in the work enough to support it. And I think that was kind of the beauty of the social media and having that connection online with people who are far away from you physically, but they're still very close because in that circle of artists that are making art. So for me, social media has been a crucial part of the success of.
I wanted to ask you, and you mentioned it now, the fact that you did a Kickstarter. For many artists, that equally is probably one of the most anxious things that they can go through, because there's a huge opportunity that you just may have quite public rejection through that process.
In the beginning, I was not planning on making a Kickstarter for that exact reason. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to get enough people to support me? Do I even know enough people to support me? Are people even interested? Like all of these doubts, all of these feelings of just like you said, anxiety and just like feeling alone and kind of why am I worthy of even asking people, right? But I think once I realized that, the worst case, I fail. And if I fail, it's okay. For me, the book was going to happen regardless. So the Kickstarter was a way to, again, engage with the community, tell them about the book and give them a book. Because it was important for me that people that know me, the people that are my friends, my peers, I wanted them to have the book because that's my audience. Like, I want people to enjoy it. I want people to talk about it. I want people to get inspired by it. So for me, I was like, okay, if I fail, I fail. And I think once I kind of had that, it was easier to decide yes. But I won't lie, like the process of doing the Kickstarter was very stressful. Yeah. I cried maybe at least once a day about it. It was just, it's a lot of work. It's an emotional roller coaster. It's like one day is good, one day is bad. And it's very hard. And the stress of, having something that's all or nothing is very hard also. So, it's not for the faint of heart doing the Kickstarter. But I think for me, I was amazed by the support and I'm even amazed that I was able to do it successfully. So I'm super grateful for everyone who supported the Kickstarter and also people who supported the book afterwards. And, support can come in different ways. It can be monetary, but it can also be just like people who shared it, people who sent a message, asked if I was doing okay, just having people around and people who cared, I think was really important. So I think that's why I felt the Kickstarter was successful, because I just felt like the community really came to support, which was wonderful. Yeah.
Well, it is out. The book is out. The book is a real thing. It's a tangible, hold it in your hand, this really exists thing, which is fantastic. And I will leave links through at our end as well with the program in the show notes. I ask a question at the end of all of my interviews. I'm really interested to know what you're going to say, particularly given your background, how you found photography, what it's done for you, the context of this book as well. What is your why?
I think for me, why? Probably because I have to. I think because photography has just been almost like a companion in my life. I think I'm not like, there's different types of photographers out there, right? So I've never been the photographer that shoots huge quantities of images rapidly every day. For me, it's almost like a need that if I don't photograph, I feel like I'm going to unravel somehow. It's just like photography has always been like an anchor. It's always been there for me. I've always enjoyed it. I've always found comfort in it. I was also like, I think I'm blessed to have a husband who's also a photographer. So we go on these photography trips together. And I think for both of us, it's this escape. It's this feeling of allowing ourselves to engage in something that's just so powerful for us and just so meaningful, and we enjoy it and we love it so much. And I don't think I could do anything else. I think that's why. I think I just randomly stumbled upon it, but I think in a way it found me because it knew that I needed it. I'm hoping that, I'm good at it, so I think I'm able to talk to people through the photography I do, and I think people resonate with it, and I think that's the best part of it. So I think for me, why is just like I really have to. It's just who I am as a person. It's kind of embedded in me now, and I think I kind of have to do it.
I'm going to set you a project, Dana. Ask your husband later the very same question.
That's a good question. Yeah.
I think your
it's a hard question, though.
Oh, I think your answer's great. I like the idea of it being an anchor. I've never heard that used before. I do like that. I think that's very strong. I wonder what he'll say. It'll be interesting. Yeah, at dinner time. I've got a question for you. And my sincere thanks today to Dana Stirling for joining us on the show and talking about her new book, which I will leave links to, of course, on the show page today. And that is it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and you want to walk a little further together, then the Extra Mile edition number 118 is waiting for you. The Extra Mile is part of our private Patreon channel, supported by our wonderful community that I call Extra Milers, and I really do thank you for supporting the show in 2024. Lots of exciting plans for 2025, and you make that happen. You really do. So thank you. Sincerely, I mean that. This week, Extra Miler, Asim Khan joins me on the show to discuss turning photography on its head slightly, or at least thinking about the subject very differently. Hang on a minute, pups, I've got to talk about Asim. He shares some super ideas that have had light bulbs switching on, that light bulbs aren't even attached to the mains yet. They're that good.
On this week's Extra Mile.
To the point, you don't have to go to exotic locations, I think.
No.
And think of grand projects that, if I were in a war zone, or if I were in a hurricane, I would take amazing pictures. No, you can take amazing pictures in your kitchen. And so it's just an exploration at the end. I don't have any higher purpose. I just want to explore all that life has to offer in this way. We have eyes to see, and I want to see in every possible way.
Our PS to the show is to come, but before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to, don't we? Or at least think about what's been said today. And it's from Tillander. Now, I've gone full-on pop with this one this week. 2 minutes, 30 seconds of unashamed pop. See, we started the show talking about my bell-bottom jeans. Now I've popped on my pop gear, my neon jumpsuit, so bright it could bring planes down in a storm. And we've had a few of those of late, that's for sure. I think this is a song of hope. I really do. Come on, pups, this way. Don't be going in that river now. We've come to the end of the walk and we've managed to keep you relatively clean. It's a song of hope. We talk about some pretty difficult subjects on our little show, don't we? We don't shy from stuff, and I hope that the message of resilience has permeated through today's show. This photography thing, that we do, it's pretty special, isn't it? It really is. So come on then, hold me hand. Let's take these neon jumpsuits onto the floor and show those millennials how to do a dad dance.
In the darkness, when it's hardest, the light is always shining brighter than the darkness. When it's hardest, the light is always shining brighter than the rain. The sun is shining brighter, higher than the clouds that bring the rain.
I think having a creative outlet, or just any outlet, whatever you kind of find, is just having a purpose in life.
Gotta wait out the storm, wait and you'll see. Gotta wait out the storm, wait right through the rain. The sun is shining brighter, higher than the clouds that bring the rain.
And yes, it does sound like somebody just lifted the needle off the record, doesn't it? Let's get a final sketchbook picture. I've not made a lot of pictures during my walk today as I've been talking to you. I've been making them, but just not as I've been walking with the microphone. Right, back along the path. It's a very sparse picture now. These are all very sparse pictures. Aren't they, pups, hey? Right, f4, 300 shutter speed, ISO 160. A dank, dark day along the footpath. The footpath of life. Neil, stop it now. So, just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you, if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. We'll keep building, say it together, this wonderful community of kindness in the photographic and walking world. A safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we do, photography and walking. My thanks to some very special people that have helped all year long with the show. We do have another show to come before Christmas. This isn't my signing off before Christmas thing, but Neil Ford, thank you. You look after IT in a way that must frustrate you sometimes. When it comes to, Neil, did you read the stuff that I sent you? Yeah, I think I did, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll go back and have a look, and then seconds later send him something, a missive saying, could you just send that thing through again? So I feel your pain sometimes, Neil, but I utterly appreciate your time, I really do. And not just for helping out on the show and being there during our live Zoom shows, but also for your friendship. I really do, thank you. And also to Andrea Gilpin, who is across Instagram, as I say each week. And Andrea, I promise you that I will endeavour to post more because you do so much work in looking out for what's coming in through Instagram, etc. And I know I've not always been the most diligent at posting as often as I perhaps should. So, and also to Kelly. Thank you for your friendship as well. And for looking after our Facebook and our Facebook members. I really appreciate it. Right, a postscript for the show. And I think resilience is the order of the day. Today it's from C.S. Lewis, the renowned British author and scholar, best known for his imaginative and thought-provoking works, including, of course, the Chronicles of Narnia series, which you need to take at least a month off of work to get through, don't you? It's quite pithy, though, this one, so don't blink. C.S. Lewis said, hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destination.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.